Hi, Danielle.
Hey.
I was just texting you, emailing you, but it's good that you're there. So I have a Mac that I'm projecting on, and I don't want to take the PowerPoints. I do have PowerPoint for the Mac, but is it possible for you to project the first slide, and then if somebody needs it to do
Yeah,
that?
one sec. I have a call. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Hen. Do you need to project your, do you need to try it out?
I did try it out earlier in the week, but I'm happy to do it again just to make sure.
Yeah. Can you share your screen, or do I need to change your setting?
I can share. Hang on.
Let me see. I just did. I just made you co-host.
All right, let's see if this works. So which one? Oh, wait, hang on. Do you see that as at the screen now? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
perfect.
like
Perfect.
okay. Great. Awesome.
So you're all set.
Cool. Thank you so much. I probably will leave my camera off while I'm talking because I have a hotspot here that isn't always the most reliable. So just to maximize bandwidth for the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then I'll turn it on when I have questions if there's time.
That's fine. I'm the same way. Sometimes I have a slow connection, and if I'm talking, I can't project.
Hey, Nellie, if you make me host, I can keep tabs on who's presenting and making them co-hosts.
Okay. I'm making you host. Okay, there you are.
Okay, and then I'll give you co-host abilities.
Okay. Okay, good.
And I could try sharing my screen again. I was just trying to find, so I could see all the chats and stuff coming up too.
Yeah. So what happened yesterday is my computer started overheating. So I also have my laptop, and I'll sign in from my laptop as well in case I overheat. I'll have to turn my camera off.
Okay. Now I'm just trying to figure out how to get this into a different view so I can see.
You should be able to it's not working if you just click the project option in the bottom.
So I just hit slideshow. Do you see it as a
Mm-mm.
slideshow?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so let me try this.
Do the view, yeah, what you did. You showed me how to do that.
Danielle, do you have two screens?
There you are.
Now I'm at home right now, so
Okay.
it's just on a laptop. But now the thing that's bugging me is seeing these little windows. Oh, I don't want to go up. I'm sorry. Good tech support I am.
It looks fine.
No, I know, but is there a window in front of it? Like a gray box?
No.
Okay, because my
Not in what I
participants,
say.
good, because my participants is open and I wanted to make sure it's not covering the screen. So Nellie, is that you as Waterbird Society.
Yes.
And, okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure it wasn't somebody else.
No, that's me, and that's what I did yesterday. I actually will be turning because now that you're host, I can turn off my screen and my video, and I'll try to stick it out in this computer, but
Will you be introducing everybody though?
yes, I'll be happy to
Okay.
introduce everybody. I'm prepared to do that. Let me see, make sure I have my thing out here. Yeah.
Great.
Yes, absolutely. And it'd be good if you can, the way I did it yesterday with Kate was I introduced everybody and I kind of ran, let's make sure I ran the process. And then Kate was scanning the chats. And so she was doing a lot of the, yeah, if you're willing to do it, it's sort of the bigger job is to do the chat and make sure that you're looking at all the questions and stuff.
Yeah, no problem.
Could I try sharing my screen?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I will stop sharing and I will make you co-host.
I don't actually know if you have to do that.
In these meetings, it seems like we've had to, but I don't know. Maybe you had a different experience, but that's how it was supposed to be set up. So
Yeah, and yesterday it wasn't working without doing that. So I had to do everybody. I had to make everybody co-host.
In the lightning session, anyone was allowed to.
oh,
Or at
really?
least like all of the speakers, I didn't have to make them co-host. They were just able to share.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I clicked some other setting on them.
Yeah, maybe it's another
We're
setting.
fine now.
I know in my
Okay.
yesterday's session, I couldn't get people. I had to make people co-hosts to project.
All
There you
right.
go.
Can you
Perfect.
see it?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
All right.
Beautiful.
Great.
Ooh, I'll just be looking at your pictures.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay.
Last day, Danielle, are you excited?
Just like, phew, once but it's not done yet, it's not over yet.
Yeah.
So, just want to make sure there's no glitches.
Yeah.
But, aside from just a couple people not being able to access things in the beginning and we figured those out, I didn't really hear of big issues. So
Don't say that before our session.
I know. All right, I'm going to shut up now. Oh.
It's almost over. It's almost over.
I have my Waterbird Society shirt on.
Ooh, nice. I just did my shopping today.
Yeah, and it takes a little while to get it, I believe, just from experience. It's not like Prime shipping, 2 days.
I love those crouching night herons, though. I just love that.
If I look at I just want to make sure this doesn't screw things up when I go to look at the program. Did that change what you guys are seeing?
Not at all.
Okay, good. I was just going to look for this session and make sure I have all the
The
speakers figured out.
Yeah, I always worry I'll mispronounce people's names, but it is what it is.
I bet people have mispronounced your name before.
I don't care. See, I kind of
So-
assumed that nobody's gonna care, just like I don't care how people pronounce my name.
Exactly. So I feel like it's a bonus if they get it right.
So I'm not getting anybody wanting, I hope we're not missing people that are trying to sign in.
Yeah, I don't see anybody either, but
Okay. Yeah, I don't see anybody.
Maybe it's just us 5.
Yeah, we have another 6 minutes.
everybody's enjoying the break. It's raining here.
It was pouring here this morning, but now it's almost sunny.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
I managed to walk my dogs before the rain started, so
Is it starting to
good
get
day.
cold up there?
it's been like today's mild just because it's overcast, but we've had some cold nights down to like 31. Yeah, not too bad yet.
It's ridiculous here. All our trees still have leaves on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
we're done. It was really windy today, so all the leaves are gone now.
not ours. My husband keeps saying, "Oh, I'm gonna be doing leaves in Christmas time."
Y empiezo.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session. We have another 3 minutes. If anybody wants to try out, I'll make sure they can project now.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can I try?
Yes.
Okay. Host disabled participant screen sharing says.
Oh, yeah. So,
Try it now.
Now, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
perfect.
Great.
Beautiful.
If people come in as, oh geez.
Okay, it's 1:20, so let's get started. Welcome to this afternoon session on conservation, habitat, and restoration. Our first speaker is going to be Rebecca Irala, who's going to talk. I'm sorry if I didn't say your name correctly.
Perfect.
Who's going to talk about contribution of citizen science and the knowledge of occurrence of herons in Paraguay.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the meeting, and I hope we can say more about this tool and the knowledge of herons in Paraguay. I present myself as Rebecca Irala, and also is the other author, Tatiana Galupi and Alberto Janowski, who actually can be present, but he apologized himself because he's going through a familiar situation. So we have his support, and so thanks to him, we are here now. Thank you very much. Well, as an introduction, let me check. There is. I want to mention that Paraguay is my country, as in the south of South America. Here we hold about 123 species of waterbirds, and in them, 14 are herons. Waterbirds have been survived since 2001 in a voluntary monitoring count census. It's a neotropical waterbird census, the first citizen science experience in Paraguay that was carried out for Wera Paraguay, an organization that works for the bird conservation and his habitats. But in the last 5 years, this tool, eBird, the use of this tool has increased in a really good percentage. So help this census to contribute about the first citizen science and also add more observers here in Paraguay. But even that we don't have any heron species that are under conservation status, some of them have few records. We found out that some of them have few records in the last years and currently have a declining population. This other research we have presented, like Alberto presented the first day of this meeting, and so we use the eBird database and other database so we can say that this situation now about some herons. But for this purpose, we use the Neotropical Waterbird Counts reports from 2004 to 2015 and the datasheets of eBird platform from 2015 until 2021 in order to quantify the number of volunteers who participate in the census and also to know which were the most and least abundant heron species, considering the records available on those databases. So, what do we found? From 2004 until the last year, more than 100 volunteers and 22 institutions participate in 126 county sites. Here in the figure, we can see that the number of individuals and species has increased and is related to the number of the volunteers also. And we can see, and in the other figure in the next slide, that in this past year, the observers and register has increased, maybe due to the pandemic situation because of the lockdown, the people get more aware about environment, and so birds were a really good tool and an opportunity for this situation, right? And also I want to mention here that we have a biannual count for herons, like in our summer in February and in our winter in July. And the other results, here we can see, like considering the eBird platform, that from 2015 until September of this year, like the eBird users has increased in an enormous way here, and like we can know like the peaks of the curve that the coincides to the counts of the Waterbird census, and also like this year, the last year from pandemic has increased a lot. So we can say for the last 5 years, the number of users on eBird has increased in 93% here in Paraguay. So it's really good to see these increases and the growth of the birders here in Paraguay. So it's really good. Also, I want to mention that in the other citizen science activities besides the Waterbird counts, we also participate and had a good participation for a country and a worldwide, because we received, like for example, in the last Global Big Day, Paraguay grown at 400% in the eBird uses. So that's a really good to know for us here. And so, but what about the herons? 73% of the waterbirds had at least one record, and in these 73% also are the herons of Paraguay. We found that the white heron, the great heron, the cocoa heron, and the whistling heron were the most counted, with more individuals and more records, besides that the three last that are the streak-back bittern, the little blue heron, and the boat-billed heron also. But we also found that 5 species have new localities records, considering the bird guide and the distribution of some of these herons, and maybe it's due to the new observers that are now growing in the country. So it's really good to know that the people are contributing to this information. But I want to stop in this slide about these species that we can see here. The boat-billed heron, this picture was taken for a ranger from a national park here in Paraguay. This is the boat-billed heron, Cochlearius cochlearius, and we found that this species has a more range-restricted and specific habitat. He lives in stream in riparian forest, and considering the other herons, they are more like in wetlands, open areas, savannas, palm savanna. So this habitat is so specific for this heron And considering the situation of his range distribution and the declining trend population that we found out in the other research, there's an urgent need to establish a stronger conservation action for his natural habitat. As I mentioned, his habitat is so specific inside the forest, so we must watch out because we don't have actually any heron, any threatened species of heron in Paraguay. But well, to mention also that the development of aware materials on waterbirds and the creation of volunteer groups in the country is highlighted. So we can say that the people, the volunteer groups that have grown, and so more people are more awareness of the birds and the conservation, and to know more about nature, where they can go to do some bird watching, and move like a little part of the economy with ecotourism thanks to this. So it's really good to mention that here, that this situation is happening in Paraguay, but there are still some challenges that we find out. For example, the expansion of observers outside the country capital, because more of the observers are in Asunción, the capital of Paraguay, and in some points of the country, we still have some empty spaces, empty areas that must be covered for observers, and so they can give more information, valuable information about the knowledge of herons or other birds, right? And also the training on the use of SeeBird platform, because when you are like starting to do some bird watching, you can miss some details, some protocols. So to have more valuable information for further researches, we must train to people for the use of this platform. For example, correctly, right? For example, designing a standard participatory methodologies where observers can contribute to make better decisions related to conservation or environmental education, because this data could help for some researchers, as for example, to show what's happening, to study a species that is not really known, what's happening, where spaces we can know more about. So those are some challenges that we find with this platform and with observers, but we are so happy to share that the volunteer groups is growing, still growing, and we are more aware about the knowledge of birds here in Paraguay. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And we have time for questions and for a discussion. I have a question.
Okay.
I'm very interested in what you said. I've done a lot of citizen science work, so I'm very interested in exactly what you're doing, looking at eBird and seeing how you can incorporate that. So how do you think that they would create better participatory models? Kind of touched on it, but I'm not sure like what you would envision from your experience.
For example, thank for the question. For example, like design like a protocol only to some points of counting, or you only can prepare one list in 1 kilometer. Only, for example, right? And for example, like focal species, or create an account for the contribution project, or like the experience of the observer too is really important. Like, for example, if you want an information for some place, you must train a group of people that can do those, pick up some information. But in the methodology, I can say, like, for example, establish a protocol and follow up all the SeeBird requirements that, for example, ask you what time, how long, the individuals is a complete checklist, and so on. Did I answer the question?
Yes, I mean, I think eBird already does a lot of that, but
Yes.
I hear what you're saying about 1 kilometer, because sometimes people go 20 kilometers in a day, you don't know where they saw something.
Yes.
Have you reached out to eBird to get that done?
Did I?
Yeah, or somebody from your group, because I think the eBird people might be willing to help you guys set things up. I'm with New Jersey Audubon, and I know we've worked with them. We have sort of a New Jersey eBird section. So eBird itself might be very willing to work with your specific needs. I can't speak about them, but I know that they've done it for us.
Okay, here I think we don't have yet an experience, right? No, we still does not have that experience, but it can be. Why not? Okay.
Dave Moore, you have a
Dave
question?
Moore. Yes.
Hey, Rebecca, that was a very inspiring talk. Thanks. The 20 years ago, there was a Waterbird Conservation for the Americas initiative. So they made recommendations and so forth. And in the next few years, they're going to be updating that. So I just wondered, like, what are your thoughts on how the citizen science projects like yours can contribute to sort of hemispheric conservation of these birds?
Well, this census was carried out by an organization. Like they pick up all the information that is collected in like or summer or winter, and you only have like the list. And so maybe this organization will be in charge of doing that. So that's all I can say. I don't know if Tatiana wants to add.
Well, I think the Waterbird census is going to update, and it's going to include a form inside eBird, because some volunteers don't want to use the old form that you need to complete in a paper. So they are updating the census using eBird to the observers and do an easier way to an easy way to analyze the information. That's the thing I know about Waterbird census, that we are talking about to update this information, because sometimes it's very difficult to observers have the form in a far away site within the country, and it's more easy if you only use the eBird platform, and you're gonna reach more people and more observers within the country and the region.
I see a couple of questions in chat.
Yes. I have read like from hand. Did you have a way of checking the quality of the records you use? We just pick up filter, and the ones that we say that have new records, like we know who are they. Like we check that those people really have, and also with a photographic proof, like they saw the species for the new birds, for the birds with new localities. But the other ones, like with the checks, more of them are like old records from like other observers and were uploaded for this organization who opened this platform here in Paraguay. But yes, for the new records localities, we check one by one and with a picture and with who is the observer. So we can confirm or not the observation with that. And for the other question from Sarah, we don't work with these optics for tropic here, right? No, we don't know, but it's a wonderful opportunity, and it's really good to know that we can have some support with this situation here in Paraguay. Like,
The citizen science in Paraguay is very new. There are only a few projects here in Paraguay starting with citizen science. So any project that are doing global is going to be a great start here in Paraguay.
You maybe you said that and I missed it, but how much did your records increase when people started submitting eBird observations? What percentage of your current observations are from eBird compared to citizen science?
We didn't like filter that part because we use the nootropic waterbird census, but
Okay.
in the last few years we check like in that part of time how it grows, because it is in the same time, but we check the observers number that has grown. But it's really good, a really good observation you made. Thanks.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's kind of difficult to do that, but
Yes. Okay, seeing here the chat. Thank you, Sarah. It will be really good. Sí, M. Sí.
thank you, Rebecca. We have one more minute, but since Alberto just signed in, Alberto, do you want to try to make sure your presentation is projecting?
Well, really, let me check if you can see my presentation here, and then I will apologize because I don't have a presentation. But let's begin with that.
That's okay.
It's okay. Can you see it?
No,
Not yet.
no, to see a small slide. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Good.
Okay. Just thank you, Nelly, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to see so many colleagues. And sorry, I just arrived. I didn't want to miss this opportunity, especially because Tatiana and Rebecca were here. And as you can see, they are very young ornithologists. I'm very proud of them. And when I mentioned the opportunity of being present in this meeting, they were a little hesitant to that. So thank you very much, Rebecca and Tatiana. I love you too. You are great. And I cannot imagine in the next, I don't know, 20 years, how much information, because really the colleagues, they are very, very young. On my personal and private life, I have just became a grandfather, and I have been the last 2 days in the hospital because my daughter had twins, and we had problems with the twins that are really very, very small. So I didn't have the time to do a presentation. I have Felix, a colleague, an anthropologist, is providing some support just to tell you something about what we are doing. I wanted to just reinforce what Rebecca and Tatiana were saying, because when I did the presentation on the Heron Symposium, they asked me some questions about eBirds that now they are answered by this great national specialist on eBirds that those you have heard from them. So what I would like to tell you right now is that after more than 30 years working as a biologist and working in a mix of ecologists, ornithology and herpetology, I have begun during the last 2 years trying to combine social sciences and especially anthropology and the knowledge of indigenous people with my background in biology, in conservation. So I began interacting with some of these people that are linked to collecting the information from the field, and I decided to work with indigenous people. Paraguay is endowed with 19 different ethnic groups. So we are, in terms of native people, original people in the country, we have that richness there. And because of a country at least having 5 different ecoregions, going from the Atlantic forest, that is a very high humid forest, up to the Pantanal, that is Tatiana's background, because she's in love with the Pantanal, she's working very, very much there. From there to the grasslands, the Pampa, the southern grasslands in South America, to the western part of the country, the Chaco, we have indigenous people. And all these indigenous people, They have lived there for many years, and it is our feeling that they know how to manage the environment. They know how what are the messages that they receive from nature. They know about the climate of these different ecoregions. So since I have been involved in climate change, and I have been also part of the Paraguayan delegation to the different conference of the party, I began trying to understand how can contribute the traditional knowledge of these indigenous people to our strategies in terms of how to do a much more greener economy, on how to advance in these nature-based solutions that we now are talking. All of us are now talking about ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solution. And we are trying to copy or adopt models that are from other continents, when perhaps we, and in our territory, in our lands, we may have many of these solutions and many of these adaptations that we need. Because if you are in the dry Chaco, or if you are in the Atlantic forest, or if you are in the Pantanal, of course that the solutions given by nature are going to be different. And if we can take advantage of working together with indigenous people. Paraguay has not been successful yet in incorporating indigenous lands into the protected area system. Still, there is a conflict there that we are trying to solve. There are some other countries in Latin America that you can now see how important are indigenous lands into the conservation of biodiversity. So the idea is that we are working together. We are working with a Federation for the Self-Determination of Indigenous People in Paraguay, and trying to see if we can find a common language. But the most important thing for me is that this, I think that all of you know about the Paris Agreement and all the commitments that many of the different countries have committed, and especially what is happening right now in COP26 in Glasgow. So we are trying to see how much we advance based on our commitment after Paris. The idea is that we need to see our national determined contribution, the NDCs, and within the NDCs in Paraguay, we have been successful to incorporate traditional knowledge and how they, for example, do a much more nature-based agriculture, for example, or agriculture in general terms, because when you speak in Spanish, agriculture is only crops, and when we use a concept in English, is much more than crops. So basically, in Paraguay, forestry, livestock production, and crops, all that included within the concept of agriculture, we have been able to incorporate many of this information into our national determined contribution. So what we were thinking that in the future, Paraguay may begin incorporating all this information into the national policies to combat climate change. Given Paraguay's situation, we are not very much obliged to do mitigation, reducing emissions, but yes, we are in the urgency of being adapted, especially those people that are living in much more vulnerable conditions. So what we are doing, we are working with the University of Cambridge, with the University of Oxford, and with the University of Pittsburgh, and we have funding from the University of Oxford, and the idea is to begin working with indigenous leaders, especially with shamans, that could be willing to share with us, those coming from the much more scientific world, all the information. And what we are trying is to get some summary information to see what is the information that is common to these indigenous people. Because of time and because of financial resources, of the 19, we are working with 5. With 5 indigenous out of the 19. So we are working with 5 leaders, and what we are doing is giving them the opportunity to upload all this information into the ethno-ornithological atlas that I will show you right now, what we are doing. And this has been, for us, this has been so successful because it is not only capturing the information from the oldest and the most wise people in the community, but also because many of this knowledge is being lost. We are capturing that information and perpetuating that information in a database, in an archive that can be of access to anyone. So some of the things that we are uploading right now in the Atlas is being used by schools, for example, to teach in their own languages, to teach about nature and the relation mainly with birds. We are using birds because of our love with birds, but also because birds are very common in the lives, in the livelihoods of all these people. And we discovered, for example, that a particular topic is about fires, for example, and regardless if the fire is used for cooking or not, we are trying to understand how they use fire in their lives. So now, yes, I'm going to try to. This is a summary of what we are learning. For example, the screamer, that is Chana turquata. The screamer is a common element in all these 5 indigenous people, and they are and the message that these indigenous people receive from the screamer is in all the cases is the same. It depends on how the screaming flies and how high it gives an information about raining. And this is common to all. So I think that what we need to do now, for example, with Rebecca and Tatiana, is trying to see what are those ecological features of this species that can make this link, trying to unite and this traditional knowledge with the scientific knowledge. So I will not take more time. I will share now the screen. And let me go to the beginning of this. So this is the Ethno-Ornithological Atlas. There you have the website, and please join the Atlas, because we are trying to do a lot of publicity of this, especially if you are working with traditional people and if you want to really capture. For example, one thing in Paraguay, there are many lands that are being claimed by indigenous people, and many sites have the original names in the original languages have changed, and they are much more Spanish now. But how important are those names in the original language, because they describe something very particular. So with the Federation for the Self-Determination of Indigenous People, we are using this information, which is very much ecological and coming from the traditional knowledge, being used on the legal aspects to demonstrate the link of this culture and these indigenous people to the land when there is a conflict, for example. So we only can see a lot of great opportunities in the short run with it. This is the Atlas, and you can see that we are working hard in Paraguay, but we have information from India, we have information from Africa. Australia is getting much more information now, but also New Zealand. So if you go into the site, you can see all this information that we are capturing there, especially with all these different ethnic groups. This is the Western heron, and this is not I don't know how to say that in English, but this is, how do you call a person that help give birth to babies? This is a partera, we say. This is a natural partera in the Guarani indigenous community. She comes from a very important area in the Atlantic forest. So she has been talking to us about all these different species, and very much because of water and the importance of water in all these aquatic birds are really important for our information. So really, there are many different tools that we need to begin using, but in the case of the Atlas, we are offering here an open process with open data and open results, and it very much depends on the wish and the desire of those that are providing the information. The community that are providing this information, because in some way this leader of this shaman is having the power to share the information with us. They are having pure control and access and sharing all the material that is there here. And we are promoting awareness of the traditional knowledge licenses, which is something very, very new. Trying to make that this is a link between different indigenous people. For example, one plan that we are having now is trying to go beyond the national borders of Paraguay and, for example, making link with the Cunayala from Panama to our 5 indigenous groups here, and see in a landlocked country that's as Paraguay, we don't have sea, we don't have access to the sea, and the Cunayala that are living in the Gulf and are living in the Caribbean, in the coast of Panama. So really what we are trying to do is trying to make all these links and trying to share all the information. And you know, sometimes it's not easy. It appears to be easy, but it's not so easy when you are an ecologist or a person that is coming from biology trying to talk to an anthropology. So sometimes we need to see that common essence. This is also a space, a special space that needs to really be very, very ethical. So the respect for the multicultural knowledge and theory, and trying to also be very respectful on who owns the information, respecting very much when we are entering into zones of discomfort. And when you are doing these interviews, allow me to say that I was talking with one shaman that is from the area that Tatiana is so much in love from the Pantanal. He's Bruno Barra. He's a leader, and he's now a cacique, just elected again. But apart from that, he's a shaman, and he was telling me that he couldn't see people because of the pandemic using this black mask. So he was sending messages by radio and by TV, telling that for them that's a synonym of death. So he was promoting. So there is a lot of information that is being shared by not only with birds and the relation with nature, but also many different things that we are learning as members of this society. So we are trying to be much more democratic, and we are trying to be very much open science, and trying to do the translation. So one on our alliance in this initiative is Wikitanks. So we are working together with Wikitanks to bring languages, because you know, if you overlap the red list of species, the IUCN red list of species, and you overlap the endangered languages in the planet, there is a lot of congruences. So really, there is a link between the knowledge and the knowledge of indigenous people and the language. And if we lose the language, we lose all that connection to nature. So the things that we are trying right now to address with all this pilot, because right now it's very much in Paraguay being developed, is how to ensure that local priorities, the views, the land rights, as I mentioned, and the cultural autonomy are integral to any conservation effort. So bringing their voice into something that has been traditionally much more managed by ecologists. How to deal with a multicultural and multilingual approach to this ecological knowledge, how we can bring them into the scientific knowledge, and how we can bring that knowledge into creating public policies. And from the perspective of birds and their ecological relations, how to foster their continued vitality and access to thriving livelihoods. So this is just for the idea with you is just to share that we are doing this. I hope that we can make links with many other people doing something like this. Also telling you about the existence of this atlas that is, as you know, an open information, and provided that the local communities are willing to share that information. And there was one last thing. Let me go to here. Nelly, I am almost done. Is here. So this is how the atlas is. Can you see the screen? So this is the whistling heron, and this name, for example, is a name in Ajoreo. Ajoreo, in South America, you have two indigenous nations that are living in voluntary isolation. They are uncontacted. And one is the Ajoreo. Imagine the importance of these people that have never been in, or they do not want to be in contact with evolving society. So one is in the Amazonian and Amazonia, and the other is here in Paraguay, the Ajoreo. So we are able now to share, and this is open, information of this messenger for them, with information, all the information that we can collect, and the locality, because this has been also allowed for us. So I stop there. Here you have I will write this into the chat. And this is all, Nelly. Thank you very much. Sorry for not having a formal presentation, but you know, I have twins, and I need to take care of them. And happy that I have been able to come here and talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Amazing work. I think it's just something different that we don't often hear about, but it's a great source of knowledge. And we have time for one question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. I
Okay.
saw in one of your lists something that said it had like a list of birds and things, and in categories, and one of them said birds that were human or people. Is that like, did I misread that?
The worry, you mean?
There are or were people, birds, like the relationship of birds to people.
Yeah.
And it's one of your categories birds that are people, or the way they interact with people?
No, and people. This is a way that you can get into the atlas. There are different ways that you can get into the atlas.
Okay.
If you want to work with one area that we are very strong, and it is not me, it's art. So we are trying to bring, and if you see, for example, the feathery art, do you say it that way in English? Sorry for that. Feathery?
Feather, yeah.
Yeah. For example, the indigenous people, the Shir, that are a native group to the Pantanal area, so very riverine. If you see all the feathers that they use in their dancing, in their I don't know, praise, and what's the message? So every feather that you see and the color, there is a link, there is a message, a particular message. So the idea is that we need to do our biggest effort from the science, from our scientific methodology, how we can understand those things, and especially because I'm convinced that we are going to have big surprises, especially in nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation. So we have the answer there. Yeah, but art is one of those big areas in which we are not taking advantage of all what is there. The relation with bromeliads, for example, in Paraguay, or orchids. It's amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Hen Bellman, and she's going to talk about piping plover brood space use following habitat creation in Delaware, USA. So we're moving into a complete different area. Looking forward to hearing about piping plovers.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, I'm just going to close that one, and you can see my first screen, okay?
Yes.
All right, well, I would be remiss starting without congratulating Alberto and his family. So congratulations on your new family member, and thank you for sharing your inspiring work. Definitely very interesting. So thank you, Nelly, and thank you everybody for attending my talk. And thank you for the organizers of Waterbird for giving me the opportunity to talk about our work in Delaware. My name, as Nelly said, is Hen Bellman. I work for Delaware Division of Fish and Wildlife in the United States, and I coordinate a variety of coastal avian projects, but today I will be talking about one particular conspicuous and characterful species which has experienced a population eruption in our state. As we've heard from some of the other speakers today, piping plovers are a migrating shorebird that's found in North and Central America. There are 3 distinct breeding populations: the Great Plains, Great Lakes, and the Atlantic coast. And this species is listed under the US Endangered Species Act, and the Atlantic coast population is listed as threatened. They arrive on their breeding grounds around the end of March, beginning of April, and establish territories where they nest on sparsely or unvegetated sandy beaches. And on the ground, they typically lay a 4-egg clutch, and under the watchful eyes of the adults, the precocial chicks are up and around within hours of hatching, foraging for themselves. Prior research indicates that chicks display a preference for moist, low wave energy habitats, such as ephemeral pools, seen here in the top image. That's compared to ocean intertidal zones, racks, backshore, open vegetation, and interdune habitat. And these ephemeral pools are documented to have greater abundances of prey items, suggesting the driver for this preference. This sandy substrate is sometimes referred to as early successional habitat and is naturally created following large storm events or exceptionally high tides. In some cases, this early successional habitat is created during habitat engineering or modification by us. Following such habitat creating events, local populations can experience population eruptions, such as described by Robinson et al. And shown here, where each figure shows a site that has an increasing population trend following a habitat creating event. And many beach nesting species actually depend on these ephemeral systems. However, we also like to occupy coastlines, and we have spent the last century modifying this habitat through shoreline and inlet hardening and stabilization projects. According to a 2015 coastwide assessment by Tracy Rice, 44% of the Atlantic coast piping plover breeding range of the United States has experienced some level of development. These habitat alterations mean that there is less nesting and chick rearing habitat for beach nesting species, including piping plovers. Furthermore, along some parts of the coast, plovers and other beach nesting species experience disturbance from high levels of recreation during the summer months, when camouflaged eggs and flightless chicks are at their most vulnerable. Prior research from coastal New York found that daily chick survival was lower on weekend days when disturbance from recreation was higher. Recreation brings discarded food items and trash, which attracts and inflates the number of opportunistic scavengers, such as red fox and gull species, which are also known to predate on plover eggs and chicks. Despite several challenges to piping plovers and due to the very hard work of dedicated managers and agencies, breeding pairs along the Atlantic coast have increased since listing, as seen here by the solid black line. The Atlantic coast population is divided into recovery units, which each have recovery goals. The overall goal for this species is to reach 2,000 breeding pairs along the Atlantic coast for a 5-year period. New England, seen here in the blue, has experienced the most notable increases, while the New York, New Jersey, and Southern recovery units have shown some variability since the species was listed. Delaware falls within the Southern recovery unit, and although breeding pairs have fluctuated, specific concerns over poor productivity have been at the forefront of recent management discussions. In Delaware, we have been monitoring beach nesting species since around the late 1980s. This is a collaborative effort which includes partners and volunteers to help with a variety of management actions, including beach closures, public education and outreach, species monitoring, and targeted predation removal. As well as piping plovers, we monitor other species, including American oyster catchers and least terns. Our goal has been to document the abundance and productivity and share these data with partners to contribute to range-wide species management and conservation. And then more recently, we've started uniquely color banding piping plover adults and chicks to better understand habitat use between breeding sites within Delaware. So historically, breeding piping plovers have been found along our Atlantic coast beaches, with the highest concentrations at Cape Henlopen State Park, which is indicated here in the purple. Between 1989 to 2016, we've had on average 6 breeding pairs. However, in 2016, a second shoreline within the Delaware Bay unexpectedly became an important breeding site, indicated here in green. The US Fish and Wildlife Service acquired funding from the Hurricane Sandy Disaster Relief Act in 2015 to undertake one of the largest restoration projects on the eastern US coast at Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge. The project was designed to restore a highly damaged tidal marsh barrier beach ecosystem covering about 4,000 acres within the former freshwater impounded system on the refuge. On the left-hand side here, you can see that the shoreline before the restoration had these multiple breaches connecting bay waters from the Delaware Bay with the refuge wetlands. And on the right, you see the site immediately following completion in 2016. The project closed the breaches, creating 2 miles of wide sandy beach with a low profile dune designed to allow overwash during higher intensity storms. Native plants such as switchgrass and spartina have also been planted to stabilize the area. Before machinery had even left the site, a pair of piping plovers showed up at the site. It's important to note that this restoration project was not designed specifically for piping plovers, but the following year, more pairs turned up. These are the first known breeding records of piping plovers using beaches along the Delaware Bay shoreline rather than the traditional Atlantic coast beaches. Following the creation of this site, we have seen a statewide increase in the recorded number of breeding pairs, shown here in the gray line. The tractor denotes when the restoration project was completed, and the increase certainly appears to be attributed to this increase in breeding habitat. When we look at the number of breeding pairs recorded at the restoration site at Prime Hook, shown here in the blue, the contribution from this site is striking. Remember, until 2016, we had reported an average of just 6 breeding pairs in the state. The number of breeding pairs at Cape Henlopen State Park has remained consistent around 5 to 6 pairs over the past 5 years. However, breeding pairs alone are just one consideration of the recovery of the species. Plover productivity is an important metric for this threatened species. The recovery plan cites a goal of 1.5 fledglings per pair, shown here by the purple dashed line. And as I mentioned earlier, productivity within the Southern Recovery Unit has been low. In Delaware, plovers have exceeded this 1.5 fledglings per pair in recent years, as we can see from the yellow bars. However, you may note that 2021 fell well below this recovery goal. In 2021, we attribute this poor productivity to a strong storm at the end of May, resulting in the loss of nests due to flooding, and a single predation incident that resulted in 6 nests being predated in a 24-hour period, and some adults not ever seen again, suggesting either abandonment or adult predation. One thing we've noticed at Prime Hook is higher nesting densities compared to the traditional Cape Henlopen State Park location. Here I've mapped out the last 3 years' nest locations. The lighter colors denote 2021, mid-purple is 2020, and the dark purple is 2019. And this also includes some renests, as we know that individuals that lose nests early in the breeding season may attempt to renest. Until 2021, birds have typically been unmarked, aside from a few individuals that were banded in New Jersey. And this means that we cannot confirm whether the same birds were returning year to year. However, based on prior research and nest locations, site fidelity may be high among adult birds. So these observations have left us with many questions. In particular, we're interested in differences in habitat use between the historic breeding areas at Cape Henlopen State Park along the Atlantic coast and Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge, and the associated implications for local and regional management. Furthermore, we would like to understand more about site fidelity and the dispersal and how this might contribute to the Southern Recovery Unit. So for today, I will just be talking about this first objective to better understand chick habitat use. Based on observations of space use and site geomorphology, we hypothesize that chicks may be traveling shorter distances to forage and subsequently have smaller home ranges at the restoration site than at Cape Henlopen State Park. So in order to test these hypotheses, we use data collected during our annual breeding surveys and some specific methods designed for these questions. We conduct beach nesting bird surveys from late March to September using spotting scopes, visiting each site 2 to 3 times a week and searching for nests. We monitor nests until they hatch or fail and follow chicks until they fledge. In 2021, we began trapping and uniquely color banding piping plover adults and chicks. And we also collected location data for chicks. This data was collected in a slightly novel way by offsetting the location of the observer and recorded using an app called Survey 123, which is shown in that bottom left image. This method was adapted from a paper outlined by Robinson et al. And deemed appropriate for evaluating fine-scale habitat use and considered less invasive and inexpensive. Lastly, we coordinated with US Fish and Wildlife Service to collect satellite imagery from the 2 sites during the brood rearing period. So for 2021, we have imagery collected in early August. So in 2021, we conducted 9 days of trapping and successfully trapped and color banded 18 adults and 27 chicks. Adults were caught on the nest between the 12th of May to the 23rd of June, and chicks were either caught in the nest bowl following hatch or using hand nets between the 14th of June to the 15th of July. We collected offset locations for chicks at each site. We did not record chicks over 60 meters from the observer in order to minimize error in GPS accuracy. And we did not record multiple locations of chicks within the same brood on the same day in order to mitigate spatial autocorrelation. In 2020, we trialed this method, which I've included here. However, because we didn't yet have any marked individuals in the population, we were much less confident in the accuracy associated, had lower accuracy in associating those chick locations to a specific nest, particularly at Cape Henlopen's, particularly at Prime Hook, because pairs were nesting so closely together. So these 2020 data were not included in our space use analysis. So you'll notice on the right-hand side, the far column, that the average number of locations per brood is quite low for each site. This has certainly presented a challenge for our analysis. We would like to eventually estimate home range using MCPs, but this method requires a minimum of 5 points per brood. However, we were not discouraged. Firstly, we looked at the linear distance in meters from each brood location to its respective nest location. And as you can see from the figure here, the average distance from the brood location to the nest bowl was higher at Cape Henlopen State Park than at Prime Hook, suggesting that chicks are moving further to forage or perhaps avoid predators. So we chose to use a tool in ArcGIS called the minimum bounding geometry tool to display the foraging areas of each brood. And this takes the outermost points collected based on that nest ID. This allows us to visualize the brood habitat use and estimate area. The average for Cape Henlopen State Park, which was that historical site on the Atlantic coast, was around 1.7 hectares. And we would eventually, as I said, like to perform more robust home range analysis. So we aim to collect more locations per brood in the coming years. Here you'll see the average area recorded at Prime Hook. It's much smaller than Cape Henlopen State Park, supporting our second hypothesis. However, we recognize that this is a relatively small sample size where only 2 broods had more than 3 location points. So we're hesitant to draw any strong conclusions based on our first year of analysis. and are certainly looking forward to collecting additional data in the coming years. Although we're working with a small data set so far, it's apparent to us that there are some differences between these two sites, and we're curious to understand what might be driving the differences in piping plover chick space use. At each chick location, the observer recorded the type of habitat that the chick was seen in and the type of behavior it was displaying when it was first seen. On the left-hand side, the two pie charts are from Cape Henlopen, and the right-hand side are from Prime Hook. The top two are habitat types that the chick was seen in, and the bottom two is the behavior that it was displaying when it was first seen. So habitat type appeared to be more variable at Cape Henlopen, where we saw chicks using a wider variety of habitats compared to Prime Hook, where at Prime Hook, chicks were predominantly seen in sandy or shelly substrate or intertidal habitats. It's possible that chicks were encountering more habitat types at Cape Henlopen State Park due to the larger space use as described in the previous map. Observed chick behavior was fairly comparable between the two sites, where foraging accounted for 50% or more of the observed behavior. And we hope to further explore these habitat types using the satellite imagery that I mentioned previously. We would like to use the imagery in order to classify different habitat types and derive site variables in order to answer questions about habitat use and availability. Lastly, I just wanted to mention some recent observations in the introduction. I mentioned that we're also planning to estimate site fidelity and examine dispersal. As of the end of last week, I heard from our colleagues that we received 7 reports of Delaware banded plovers from New Jersey and Georgia, which are 2 states along the Atlantic coast in the US. Those locations are indicated here by the pink stars. And these were records of 4 different individuals. 1 was banded as an adult, 2 as chicks, and 1 was only a partial resite, so we can't confirm the individual in that case. We have seen in Delaware previously banded birds from New Jersey breeding on our shorelines, which further supports movement across the Delaware Bay, and we're excited to learn more about dispersal and contribute to what this might mean for the larger breeding population. So in summary, we have seen an increase in the local breeding population of piping plovers. We have recently started to mark individuals and collect location information in order to better understand habitat use by broods. We recognize that we still need to collect more information about location in order to increase our sample size, but we recognize that it could be an option for folks looking for inexpensive and less invasive options for small scale habitat use. On average, we did find that broods used smaller areas and traveled shorter distances at that restoration site at Prime Hook compared to Cape Henlopen State Park. Interestingly, we noted lower productivity in 2021, and although we could understand the drivers of that this year, we are curious to understand whether that restoration site may be reaching carrying capacity. So we would certainly like to explore more information about these 2 sites and the habitat variables. And then lastly, that we have observed these movements between Delaware and New Jersey, as well as received resite records from non-breeding areas. So for next year, we will be continuing with our breeding surveys as well as nest monitoring. We'd like to increase the number of brood locations in order to more accurately estimate those home range areas. We will continue trapping and banding adults and chicks and explore habitat variables at each of those sites in Delaware. And then just to bring it back to kind of management actions, we are realizing that Prime Hook is undergoing vegetation encroachment. And so in order to maximize habitat for this increasing population, it may be necessary to perform some level of vegetation removal or suppression. And then lastly, I've just said here that we're always interested in exploring opportunities for collaboration, given so many people working on piping plovers along the Atlantic coast. So I've heard a lot of comments about collaboration and partnership, and I'm a big advocate for that. These last 2 field seasons during COVID have certainly been a test of true perseverance and partnership. Thank you to all of our partners who've supported this work, including the US Fish and Wildlife Service, Prime Hook staff, and Anne Hecht, And also our partners, Kashi and Emily in New Jersey, who help coordinate the founding aspect. Special thank you to all of my staff who've been very hardworking and creative under challenging field seasons, juggling COVID protocols, and also challenges of a new project. And of course, to the Waterbird Society for hosting another fantastic virtual meeting. And then one last plug, if you do see any color-banded plovers, we would love for you to report them to Kashi via this email address given here in blue. And with that, I will say thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. We don't actually have time for questions right now. We're going to move on to the next talk, but we have a 20-minute break because the program's the schedule changed. So after Lainey's talk, we can ask the questions. So our next presenter is Lainey Espik, and she's going to talk about an examination of exclosures for protecting nesting interior least terns in Indiana.
Okay, awesome. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
And everybody sees my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Lainey Espik, and I'm doing a presentation on about an examination of exclosures for protecting nesting interior least terns. I have been the interior least tern monitor with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources for 3 years, and this research was a part of my master's capstone through Oregon State University. So I know most of you are probably familiar with least terns, so I'll just briefly go over this. Interior least terns are the smallest North American tern species. I always say like the size of a robin, but that would be an American robin, not a European one. Their most distinctive characteristic is their black cap and laurel stripe and white forehead. And there are 3 subspecies, but they do not differ in morphology or behavior. The other 2 subspecies of least tern are the coastal and the California. Migration and wintering ranges are believed to have significant overlap between the subspecies, though this is an area that still needs studied. Least terns nest on the ground in small scrapes with typical clutch size of 1 to 3 eggs and feed mostly on fish, so proximity to water is very important for their nesting. There are 4 subpopulations of interior least terns currently recognized. Terns in Indiana are associated with the lower Mississippi population, which is this kind of blue shading in the middle. And as you can see from this map, there's overlap between the coastal and interior breeding populations along the Gulf. So interior least terns were listed as federally endangered in 1985. Intensive surveys from 85 to 87 estimated the population at only 5,000 adults. By 2005, the population was estimated to contain at least 17,500 adults, well above the original proposed goal of 7,000 adults for delisting. Interior least terns were officially delisted from the Endangered Species Act this year in February, I think, but they remain state endangered in Indiana. No range-wide population survey was done at the time of delisting, but populations are thought to have continued to increase since the 2005 survey. The number of adult interior least terns that breed in Indiana is currently around 100. The number of interior least tern pairs has been declining since 2015 here. Number of fledglings produced has declined since a high in 2014 until this year, when we finally had fledgling production increase. Cause of declines in pairs and fledglings is believed to be from predation and altered nesting habitat. Their preferred habitat is flat, open spaces that are close to water but safe from ground and aerial predators, but much of this habitat has been destroyed because of river channelization and dam building, leading interior least terns to nest in less traditional environments such as ash flats, rooftops, agricultural fields, and man-made islands. This also increases their proximity to novel predators. So in Indiana, interior least terns are at risk from mammalian predators such as coyote, raccoon, possum, mink, and skunk. And then they also face danger from avian predators such as American kestrel and great horned owl. In a 2003-2004 study, predation on a colony in Indiana was found to be mostly from rats, black-crowned night herons, and ring-billed gulls. But predator dynamics around the colonies have changed since then because we don't see predation from these animals anymore typically. And it became clear that a new study on predation was needed. So in 2018, a least tern monitor was hired to help determine what issues the ILTs faced during breeding season. That year, trail cameras discovered a snake and a coyote at separate colonies were partly responsible for nest predation. We continued the study in 2019, which provided more evidence of the impacts of predation. Statewide productivity in 2019 was the lowest since 2004 at only 0.41 fledglings per pair, which is below the threshold of 0.51 fledglings per pair suggested to maintain a stable population. At AEP, there were individual predation events by kestrel, red-eared slider, and coyote. The coyote ended up visiting when the peak number of chicks was reached, and after this, no more chicks were seen, and all adults abandoned the colony. At Goose Pond, predation occurred from great horned owls and mink, which also destroyed the small colony of only 6 nests. And then we also saw coyote and great horned owls depredating nests at Gibson Station and Cane Ridge, but these colonies were still able to produce 28 fledglings. So one of the main ways we try to protect interior least terns from predators is the use of predator exclosures. Predator exclosures are fences that encompass the area a colony typically nests in the hope that predators will not be able to enter the colony. Many previous studies have found that exclosures increase nest and chick survival rates of least terns and other similarly nesting birds. In Indiana, every location has a different exclosure type, and data from previous years suggests that not every exclosure type protects interior least terns the same. So my objective for this research was to rank the different exclosure types found at colonies in Indiana to determine which was the most effective at deterring predators. Here's a map of our study sites in Indiana. The green one is Goose Pond Fish and Wildlife Area in Linton, Indiana. Black is Cane Ridge Wildlife Management Area, and the orange one is the American Electric Power Plant in Rockport, Indiana. The blue diamond behind Cane Ridge is the Gibson Generating Station, which is a Duke Energy power plant, but it was not included in this study. So Goose Pond is a state-owned wetland that is managed for wildlife by the Indiana DNR, which is about 5 miles from the White River. Interior least terns nest on Tern Island, which is a 3-acre island surrounded by shallow water. The island is enclosed by 4-foot-tall chain link fence with 2 strands of electric wire on the outside and topped with brown aluminum flashing. Island substrate is made up of sand and gravel, and outside of the fence, the island is surrounded by riprap, which are large rocks leading from the island to the water. And we treat it in the spring with herbicide to provide preferred nesting habitat, but vegetation typically starts growing in the late summer. So for 2021, we ended up removing the aluminum flashing that was around the fence last year and only had chain link and electric protecting the island. We kept a small amount of flashing at the gate to cover up holes that a mink could get through. Cane Ridge is located near the Wabash River and managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It has 2 islands for least tern nesting, Tern and Rays. Each island is about 2.4 acres with sand and gravel substrate, 4-foot tall chain link fence, and riprap on the outside. The islands sit in a 50-acre pool of shallow water. And in normal years, the island also has a 4-strand electrified fence, but due to COVID-19 and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protocols, the fence was not able to be electrified in 2020. Thankfully, we were able to get it electrified in 2021. So AEP is a coal-fired power plant in Rockport, Indiana, near the Ohio River. ILTs nest on the gravel dikes that bisect 4 separate ash ponds to the south of the plant. Its south dike is a fence section that is actively managed for nesting. It's about 1,000 feet long and maybe 10 feet wide on the top. In 2020, it was exclosed by a 4-foot tall electric fence, which you might be able to see kind of this white fence over here. And then this orange safety fencing at each end of the dike. Least terns also nest on the other dikes outside of the fence, but they don't have any protections. In 2021, we redesigned the exclosure at AEP based on a similar system at the Gibson Station. 4 cattle gates were placed that extended into the water with 6-foot tall chain link extending above them. The 4-strand electric fence was kept along the length of the dike and extended to run to the top of the chain link. And I will briefly go over my methods here. So to rank the different types of exclosures, I placed trail cameras inside and outside exclosures at each colony. At AEP, which is the picture on the right, 2 cameras are placed, one inside and one outside the exclosure at the beginning and end of the dike. At Goose Pond and Cane Ridge, which the one pictured on the left is Goose Pond, but Cane Ridge looks almost identical. There are 3 groups of cameras placed, one inside and one outside, dividing the island into thirds. I replaced memory cards every month in 2020 and every 3 in 2021 due to battery life and memory card limitations. When reviewing the pictures, I looked for predator events defined as an identifiable predator detected on the camera. And predator events were defined as separate if they were of a different species, obviously different individual, or occurred 30 minutes after the previous event. Avian predator events were omitted from this analysis because they cannot be excluded from the colonies. This data plus observations from the season allowed me to rank the exclosure's effectiveness at deterring predators. Okay, so the exclosure that ended up being the most effective was the electrified chain link that was present at Cane Ridge and Goose Pond in 2021. The high gates with electric at AEP in 2021, and the electrified chain link with aluminum flashing at Goose Pond in 2020 were also extremely effective. However, due to downsides in design, were ranked after the electrified chain link. Chain link only, which was present at Cane Ridge last year, was effective most of the time. And the electrified with safety fence at AEP in 2020 was only effective half of the time. And then this is the type of vegetation we have that grows up late in the summer, and a cute chick. So the winner is electrified chain link. It is a permanent structure that requires low maintenance from year to year, besides connecting the electric fence charger and any minor repairs that need to be done. One important thing to note, if you were to pick this type of exclosure, is that the top rail of the chain link should be kept thin, kind of as seen in this picture, to limit perching ability for raptors. And electrified chain link can be used in a variety of habitats. The initial installation would be costly, but it appears that it's worth it for the amount of success that it provides. Of all 5 exclosure types, it had the highest arrival to fledging, You must ensure, though, that holes can't be dug under it. So if possible, it should be buried in the ground. And then gaps near the entrance gates will need to be covered to ensure that small mammals cannot fit through the holes. And there's also the potential for predators to climb over the fence if the electric fails during the season. So for the runner-up, some pros are that the high gates are harder for predators to jump over, and extending the fence into the water hopefully deterred most predators from walking along the riprap or swimming around the fence. It works really well on dikes like the one at AEP pictured above, and areas where chain link can't be buried. The cons include difficult installation. Thankfully, we got assistance and installation from the power plant crew. And it could also be climbed over if the electric failed. This design was chosen because of success in 2020 at the Gibson Station Colony. However, their fence was shorter. And in 2021, a combination of a skunk and heavy geese activity caused Interior Least Terns to abandon the site early in the season. The electrified chain link with aluminum flashing was very effective at keeping predators off the island, except no Interior Least Terns nested when the flashing was up last year. We still did have some blackneck stilts and killdeer nesting successfully on the island. We had originally decided on this design to keep mink from climbing over the fence, which did appear to have worked, but ultimately had several cons, including a laborious installation, easily damaged by wind, and very loud if it disconnected from the fence and ended up flapping in the wind. Because of all this, we decided to not continue using this method in 2021. So chain link only was still successful most of the time at deterring predators and performed better than no exclosure at all, but survival to hatching and survival to fledging were low. So it can easily be climbed over and jumped over and does not deter a very determined predator. And then for the last one, the electric with safety fence was the least effective as we found it to be easily evaded by predators. Originally, our thinking was that the flimsy orange snow fencing would scare predators away, but that did not seem to be the case. If it did, they quickly adjusted to it and then just ended up walking along the dike to access the colony. So in summary, from data and observations, it's clear that electrified chain link is the best option that we know of for protecting nesting Interior Least Terns at a permanent colony. Both Goose Pond and Cane Ridge, which had the electrified chain link, had increases in success to fledging in 2021 compared to previous years. Despite the effort that might incur to install such a permanent structure, it appears to be worth it to protect a colony of birds that nest in the same area year after year. So I'd like to just give a quick shout out to my supervisor at the DNR, Allison Gillette, and my M&R advisor through Oregon State, Dr. Joan Hager. I did this project as part of my master's capstone through Oregon State University. I would also like to shout out our partners, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, American Electric Power, and Duke Energy, and the several volunteers who make monitoring much easier. This project was completed on the ancestral lands of the Shawnee, Cherokee, Osage, Kickapoo, and Miami tribal nations. Most Indigenous people were forcibly removed from Indiana to either Kansas or Oklahoma in the mid-1800s. And today there are no federally recognized tribes in Indiana, but I provided these links if you want to learn more about their culture. And if you have any questions, I'm ready for questions. And, if you don't right now, feel free to email me. I am pretty much always on email.
Thank you, Lainey. And we do have time for questions. I'm gonna keep the room open. And our next talk is at 3. So we have some time to ask questions to all the speakers that have spoken so far. But let's start with Lainey, if anybody has questions for Lainey right now. I have a question for Lainey.
Okay.
So the fencing seems to work really well, but what did you see as far as avian predators are concerned? Is that gonna be an issue? Oh, Lainey froze. It's okay. Seems like we lost Lainey. So there's several questions in the chat for Hen. One of them is from Michelle Stanchel, and her question is curious about the National Wildlife Refuge. I didn't see rackline as an option in the habitat types that the chicks used, but I know there's an extensive rackline. Wondering why you chose not to include that as a habitat type.
Thanks, Nellie. I've been frantically messaging people back and forth directly, so I may have answered Michelle's question, but I'm more than happy to talk about it more if people are interested.
I would be.
Yeah, so the habitat types that we are presented today within those pie charts are based on those observer determinations of habitat types, and the list of options was based on a study that was actually put together by the USGS a few years ago called iPlover that had a couple of different habitat options. So we actually just took them and threw them into our survey to have some consistency and comparability in the future. And RAC was definitely in there. I think I was saying to Michelle, I think there might have been some possible bias from observer interpretation, because obviously a lot of the chicks, when we see them, are kind of running around foraging between different areas. And if you happen to see a chick that's like in a little bit of sand just in front of a rack line, then it's like, do you say that the chick was in the rack or that it was in the sand? And so I think there's some observer bias in those results, which is one of the reasons why I would like to use the imagery that we have in order to do like a less biased interpretation of some of those habitat types.
Thank you. Doesn't look like there are any other questions. There was another question about vulnerability of chicks to predation because of color bands, and I think you answered that in the chat.
Yep, I also shared a paper with Riley that looks at the effect of survival or on using color bands, specifically color bands. So I can also share that if people are interested in that.
All right, I'm going to keep the room open. I'm going to keep the room open. See you all in about 15 minutes. Our next presentation is going to be by Jenna Schlenner, and the title is SeeBird, Lessons from the First 3 Years of a SeeBird Community Science Project.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try sharing my screen. All right, can you see that?
Good.
Yep, okay, great. Thank you everyone so much for being here today. My name is Jenna Schlenner, and I'm going to be talking about our community science project called SeeBird and the lessons we've learned from the first 3 years. I'd like to take a moment to first recognize my co-authors, Tula Holman, George Rising, and Sadie Ullman, who were the founders of this project and who without which we couldn't be where we are today. Over the past few decades, Alaska's shoreline has faced many challenges. Events such as the Exxon Valdez oil spill and recent record-breaking marine heat waves have impacted wildlife, the extent of which we still have yet to fully understand. Monitoring seabird populations can be a useful tool to understand how Alaska's marine ecosystems are responding to those challenges. Since 2011, the Alaska Sea Life Center has been conducting the only year-round seabird survey in Alaska. This has provided us with an incredible data set to track changes in seabird abundance, diversity, and phenology. Our accessibility to the waterfront and our community's cultural relationship to the ocean, combined with an ever-changing climate, inspired us to try to connect our research to our community. SeeBird was created as a collaborative community science project between the Alaska Sea Life Center and local Seward High School to both assist our research goals and to introduce the community to the science happening in their front yard. In 2018, SeeBird began as a 1-year pilot project, with the overall goals to create partnerships between researchers and the high school, to engage students in community-based observations, to offer school support and connections for their science classes, to fortify our ongoing surveys with more frequent observations. And after the success of the first year, everyone involved agreed that the project was worth continuing, and it restarted in the fall of 2019 and has been ongoing since. Our refined objectives for this project are to collect data on the species composition, numbers, timing, and trends of seabirds along the Seward shoreline. Using those data, we plan on comparing the shore-based counts that the students conduct to our monthly vessel-based seabird survey counts conducted by the Sea Life Center to see if we're getting similar results during similar times. With the shoreline surveys, we'll be able to get more frequent counts of seabirds in the area, which will allow us to get more fine-scale information on the timing of birds moving through the area throughout the year. Our final goal is to use this as an opportunity to connect with the local students to train the next generation of scientists. We work closely with the local high school educators to come up with lesson plans that will allow the students to participate in all the steps of the scientific process. We mentor the students on surveys to learn field identification skills, and the students are taught how to use various scientific instruments and learn the importance of quality control. The students are responsible for data entry and take on their own data analysis. At the end of the season, the students present their findings to the local community to continue to share what they've learned. Our seabird survey takes place in Seward, Alaska. We selected the location used for the survey for 2 reasons. First being the convenience of access for both the students and other community members so that there are less barriers to getting out for a survey. And secondly, the transect that the students survey covers the same area as the first transect of the Sea Life Center surveys, which will make for easier comparison, and it will boost the overall information gained on that location. The transect that the students walk is broken up into 4 segments, which were designated based on length, habitat, and having an easy to notice marker that the volunteers would recognize. This allows for flexibility with the student schedule so that if they don't have enough time to do all 4 segments, then we at least know which sections were covered. During the survey, the students collect 2 types of data, the first being environmental data. At 2 locations along the first segment of the transect, Water quality data are recorded using a YSI meter, one above and one below the mouth of a freshwater stream, which we use as an opportunity to show students how freshwater inputs mixing with the ocean can cause differences in water measurements depending on the location. We also record weather and sea conditions, including wind, cloud coverage, precipitation, and sea state. After the survey, the students go back to the classroom and use NOAA's tide charts to get the tide time, the type of tide, whether it was high or low, and the tide height in feet that was closest to the time that they went out for the survey. This gives us data that we can use to look at correlations between tide height and the birds that we're seeing, and it gives the students the opportunity to practice reading charts and tables. The other type of data that the students are collecting is observational data on what animals that they're seeing along the shoreline. The students scan for seabirds and marine mammals within 100 meters of the shoreline, and once an animal is observed, the students identify down to species or whatever their level of confidence is, and record the number of individuals seen, the number of male and female, if applicable, and the behavior, flying, land, or on water. They also record the coordinates of the location of the observation and then continue walking the segment. Mentorship is one of the most critical aspects of this project. When we train a new group of community volunteers, we go over techniques for observing birds, pointing out what they should be looking for to help them with identification. We also give them a presentation on what the common birds are in our area so they're familiar with what they're likely to see. We emphasize only identifying down to the level that they're confident and that it's better to call something just an unknown duck than to try to guess and misidentify, reassuring them that we don't expect them to know everything and that it's a learning process. On every survey, we also have an adult assistant who has bird ID experience and who can help guide the students to the correct identifications to make sure that bird IDs are being recorded accurately. Here's an example of the data sheets we give to the students. We try to leave as little open to interpretation as possible, as we found otherwise this creates a lot of work when cleaning up the data. We've also found it useful to have these checkmark boxes to remind the students when entering the data to enter all parts of the data sheet, which are entered sometimes in different databases, and we found sometimes got forgotten, which I'll talk about in a little bit. We also wanted to try to gauge how well the students were doing with data entry after the first 3 years, so we can see where we need to improve on our communication. To do this, we compared the hard copy of the data sheets to what the students entered into the database, categorizing the types of errors found as missing data, which was missing data from the database, not the data sheet, transcription errors, such as entering one individual when it was supposed to be two, or technical errors, like when you drag down a cell in a spreadsheet and it predicts what you want instead of just trying to copy the cell. And we also wanted to try to quantify if we saw improvements in the data entry over time. So we recorded the number of errors per row of data entry. I thought that it was important that we mention how we managed to continue this project despite all of the complications that COVID brought along. In the spring of 2020, when students were having to do school from home, my co-author and one of the founders of the project, Tula Holman, took on the data collection for a few months to try to keep as much continuity as possible. We were lucky to then have a high school volunteer take over the observations for all of the summer of 2020. Then in the fall and winter of 2020 to 2021, a group of homeschool students and their parents who had previously been involved in the surveys helped keep them going. We are so grateful for all the volunteers for stepping in and helping keep this project going, and it really emphasized to us how important community engagement and excitement about these kinds of projects are to keep them running. Over the past 3 years, there have been 96 surveys and an impressive 2,150 observations, which only includes the data that we have QA/QC'd so far, so not including what this fall's student cohort have completed. Over that time, we've maintained a decent amount of coverage of surveys each month. So here we have month on the x-axis and the number of surveys on the y. Our pilot year was between the fall of 2018 and spring of 2019. And there was a short gap in 2019, after which we decided to commit to this as an ongoing project. On average, we've been able to get 3.1 surveys done per month, with at least one survey done each month. So how did the students do with data entry? There were 908 observations, which were both recorded and entered by students from 2018 to 2020. The first year had the highest rate of mistakes, and that decreased over the next 2 years. And while the decrease wasn't substantial, that's still on average less than one mistake per row of data entered for each cohort. Here we have the date of the survey on the x-axis, which we separated by cohort, and the y-axis is the error rate, or the number of mistakes per row for each survey. Looking at the mistakes made over time, there was a large number that occurred in the first month of the study, after which the mentors went back into the classroom to review data entry. And you can see that there weren't many other dramatic spikes like that, except in April of 2019, which is when that one student took over the entire project herself, which is admittedly a lot of work for one person. This is also heavily influenced by who is entering the data, and some of these larger spikes are the result of one person making the same mistake for a whole survey's worth of data. Of the mistakes made, the biggest issue was missing data, with 228 instances where data was missing. And again, this was missing from the database, not the data sheet. The most common pieces of data that were missing were notes, missing tide data, behavior, and the GPS points. It wasn't emphasized to the students that the tide data always needed to get entered, and it was after this realization that we decided to add the checkbox to the data sheet for the tide data to remind students that they needed to record that after the survey. And while missing notes, behavior, and GPS points are troublesome and something that we definitely want to make sure doesn't get missed in the future, those pieces of data aren't as critical as things like date, species, number of individuals, and segment number, which were never missing. There were 99 instances of transcription errors, with the most common issue by far being incorrect GPS coordinates. Again, kind of understandable. It's a lot of numbers, mistakes happen. And only 18 of the transcription errors were cases where there were discrepancies between the number of individuals, and that was usually only off by one. There were surprisingly only 10 instances of technical errors, which actually represented only 3 mistakes that were carried down from previous rows. So it's reassuring knowing that entering into the database as far as like technical issues with the spreadsheets aren't a big issue for them. And at face value, this seems like a lot. 228.99 seems like a lot of mistakes, but it's important to remember that these are high school students, and for most of them, this is their first foray into entering large amounts of data. And while we were looking at the mistakes made, I want to give them credit that they were overall very successful. They entered 908 rows of data with 25 columns, so 22,700 cells of data entered, and only 1.5% of those cells had a mistake, and we can only improve from here. Out of 1,021 student seabird observations, only 164 were not identified down to species. Though we were interested in how the rates of unknowns changed over the course of the school year, because the students were always supervised by someone with bird ID experience, the rate of unknowns was relatively consistent. Unsurprisingly, the most frequent unknown seabird group was unknown gulls. We often get streams of gulls flying up into the bay, and this can be challenging for students and even folks with experience. So we're not too surprised about that. The second most commonly unknown group were mergansers, which again, the females can be quite tricky to tell apart when not paired with a male. Cormorants, goldeneyes, loons, winter ducks in general, and scoters were all also groups that were sometimes difficult to identify, but those didn't represent a substantial amount of the data. The first cohort of students completed formal reports and were able to present their analysis to the community in 2019. Some of the questions that they looked at included the relationship between Barrow's goldeneye and water temperature, and if tide height impacted the number of ducks seen. And one student was able to look at how the 2018 to 2019 shore-based and vessel-based sea duck counts compared. And you can see in the figure that they made that the numbers were often quite close. Our next steps of this project are to dive into the data ourselves and to start looking at these trends and the relationships between our observations and the environmental variables. Some of the lessons learned looking back at the first 3 years of this project are that the earlier that you can check the data, the faster mistakes can be fixed and prevented. We have clarified our protocols for data entry and have found that giving examples of what the database should look like has helped tremendously with keeping the data entry consistent. And while it can be difficult to coordinate sometimes, having experienced folks on the survey throughout the year was really beneficial to giving us confidence in the identifications. It also gives the students so many more opportunities to improve on their own identification skills by having more opportunities to ask questions. We also found that having the connection with our larger survey project was very exciting and motivating for the students because they could feel like they were contributing to something bigger. Just some final thoughts. Connecting with local high schools can be an excellent way to engage younger folks in research and waterbird ecology. And when provided the right tools and support, young students can provide very valuable data. We also feel that this model can work in many communities with many different projects and hope to potentially expand this project in the future. And with that, I would like to thank some of our funding sources, including Ocean Alaska Science and Learning Center, the Seward Community Foundation, and the Cumin Foundation. I'd like to give a big thanks to our research intern, Riley Temkin, who did a lot of the QA/QC work, which is a lot of work. It's really great. A big thanks to Seward High School and the two teachers who have been involved in this project, George Rising and Zach Hazard, the teaching aides who have assisted, and all the students who have done an incredible amount of work and gone out in rain and snow and wind and cold and enthusiastic all throughout, and all of the community mentors and volunteers who have helped us. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jenna. It's amazing that you can get the high school students to do all that work.
Yeah, we are so excited about how this project has gone so far, and like most excited about the enthusiasm that the students show. I mean, even this year, there was one day that it was like downpouring, and we gave the students the option to not do the survey, and they were all in on doing the survey.
There's a question in the chat from Riley. I'm not sure if this is applicable, but have you seen a connection between community involvement with these counts and community attitudes towards conservation measures?
So I've only been involved in this project since April, so I don't know if I would personally be able to see over time if we've seen this. And I think that there are some complications with like having a bulk of this project having happened over COVID and not being able to have those opportunities to really like have those conversations, have as many conversations and connections with the community as we would have liked to. But I'm sure that that's, you know, a possible outcome, and we're hopeful that that is the case. And I'm sure as this project keeps going and we continue to do these community presentations, that some community members will continue to feel inspired.
I have a question for you, Jenna. Did you find that there were just certain teachers that were really interested? Like, how did you get buy-in from the teachers or the school? I find that working with students, you really have to have a teacher that's motivated and interested in order for it to even go anywhere. So I was just wondering how you went about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So George Rising is the teacher that we are connected with through the high school. And he, from the beginning, was very enthusiastic and excited about this project. He's really excited about experiential education. And so we had buy-in from him from the beginning, and that, yeah, is definitely a big reason why this has worked so well. And so we've coordinated with him even throughout the year, like helping plan lessons that would teach the students things that would be useful for the surveys. There has since been a new teacher who's teaching the classes, Zachary Hazard. And he's also been really great with helping coordinate getting buses and creating lesson plans. So we're really lucky that there were teachers who were already excited about the project from the start.
And just one more, do you plan to expand to other schools, or is it really location based, so you're sticking to that high school?
So right now we're sticking with this high school. We love the idea of bringing this model to other communities, and so are definitely open to having conversations with other communities and seeing how we can get this set up in other places.
I have a question. Have you thought, or do you have any access to people that can help set this up as an app so students can actually enter the data on their phones?
Yeah, I guess this is something that has been talked about previously. I think part of our thought with this is with the actual data entry on a data sheet is giving them the practice of doing that process, entering data onto a data sheet and then transferring it to a database, which is often how things are done in research. And so, yeah, giving them that practice. But I think an app would also be really, really useful and something that I think we might be interested in.
Yes, I was wondering if that was the process, because often, you know, you don't have anything to go back to do the QA/QC if they're interested.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think I see a question from Marissa. Do you keep in touch with the students after high school to see if this experience influenced what they study in college or pursue in terms of jobs and internships? That's a really great question and something that I would definitely be interested in. Again, I'm relatively new to the project, so I don't know who the students were previously, but that's definitely something that I'd like to talk to the teachers about and see if they kept in touch with the students to see where they're at and what they're doing now. Yeah, great question.
Thank you, Jenna. Our next speaker, our last speaker for the meeting, but not least, is Miyuki. And she's going to talk about night birds at Lotus Fields meet cinema camera. And Miyuki, I have to tell you, I always look forward to your talks
Really?
because they're always very artistic and creative.
Wow. Yeah, I'll do my best. So please wait for a while. Okay.
Can you share your screen? You should be able to. There you go.
All right. Today's topic is this. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining. And at first, my English is very primitive, so if there are any inconvenience, I'm sorry. And now it's just before sunrise, so I think I don't think clearly. So, but anyway, I'll start. Okay. So, did you enjoy my field trip? So I've been studying colonial herons and eaglets. So I enjoyed Heron Symposium very much, and I wanted to join. But currently I'm working on ducks, and my sim is like this, and today's topic is this. Okay. Yep. Oh, wait. Okay, next. Today I'm going to talk firstly about the lotus field, and second, conflict between human and birds, water birds, and third, how to approach our problem. Okay, about lotus field or lotus root. So this is lotus root. This is an enlarged stem of lotus, and it's very healthy vegetable. And this is about $2 each, and texture is crispy and very slightly sweet, like a sweet corn, or very slightly sweet. And it's also good for hamburg meat. The grated lotus root inside the meat. And also dried or powder is good. So this is the pasta and noodles, and this is my favorite cookie. Contains a lotus flower powder. So lotus root is bring us luck. You can see into the future through its holes, and it's a favorite vegetable for Japanese New Year dishes. And where is the major producing prefectures? This Ibaraki Prefecture, eastern part of Japan, is the top producer. And let's focus. Here is my study area. It's about 60 kilometers northeast of Tokyo. There are a lot of lotus fields around Lake Kasumigaura. This lake is the second largest lake in Japan, and I'm here. Very beautiful landscape, and the lotus field is semi-natural wetlands, so it's habitat for many water birds like this. However, there are conflicts between human and water birds. So this is so-called duck damages. Farmers cannot bring these damaged lotus root market, and local government officers estimate the damage amount every year about $2 million by ducks and $1 million by coot in 2019. But this amount is just an estimate. And conflict. So local government, this is a bird net covered on each lotus piece like this. So local government started to financial support for farmers, but it's not so low cost, the high cost money and time. So maintenance is not easy. That's why is totally covered netting changing to partial netting. So, but water birds could get into the lotus field under the net, or they can pass through the top net. So thousands of birds netted and died every year. So birders say, save birds, and ducks may be innocent because we don't have data. So who are true lovers, or how do they find or eat lotus root in the mud? So stakeholders have just suspected duck and could eat lotus root without conclusive evidence. That's our problem. Because foraging ducks visit lotus field mainly at night, so hardly visible. I tried a camera trap, but it's practical only 10 meters at most, so it's inconvenient. So how to approach the problem? So we want to get evidence, and to answer these questions, we conducted videography at night using this camera. So this is a Sony Alpha 7S III. Feature is like this, and this camera is good for low light situation. So I'll show you the sample film. Yeah. So let's try this camera. And he has a talent for movie creation, and I learned a lot from him. And yeah, so yeah, I talk about a fieldwork schedule, and this is a calendar of lotus root, lotus, and the lotus fields are covered with water throughout the year, and the planting in spring. This is yeah. So and harvest in winter. And there are two species, only two species are resident, spot-billed duck and eastern Eurasian coot. But in winter, there are a lot of wintering ducks coming to our field. So during the harvesting and wintering period, we conducted night shooting from car window. And this is the original footage. It's very but still dark enough, and how to analyze foraging behaviors. So we performed a color correction and grading with a video editing application, DaVinci Resolve, by extra range tuning of parameters like this. This is original. So please see the waveform below, and there are no color information in highlight or mid-tone in original footage. And yeah, so we change we did a tuning and adding highlight and yeah, and noise reduction, and finally we get these collected footage. This is very ideal for analyzing their behavior. So this footage is taken in light with street light field, but in field without light, the original is like this. So after collected, but it's very noisy, but much better than original. So after color collecting and grading, I could categorize the patterns of foraging behavior. Please remember there are two situations, two lotus field situations. So if bird eats pre-harvest lotus root, it should be damaged. But in post-harvest field, just eating waste lotus root, so not damaged. And yeah, so and if birds eat just floating weeds or plankton, it should be no damage. This is my expectation. So waterfalls in my field are Eurasian coot and 9 species of ducks. And who are the 2 lovers or night birds? And do they find pre-harvest root? Yeah, this is result. Foraging behavior are different among species. Oh, so let's see. This is spot-billed duck and repeating head submergence. Or they eat lotus root like this. Okay, and how about mallard? Head submergence, and they can digging using their webs. And coot, they can dive. Probably attacks the lotus root in mud. And in post-harvest field, they eat waste lotus root like this. And how about vision? They are not so good at eating. Try to eat. And on the reach, it's much better, easier to access or eating. And she's just eating floating weeds. And northern shoveler. So shoveler is shovelers, just spraying the water surface of plankton. So summary, using camera shooting technique, we succeeded in shedding light on suspect damaging lotus root at night. So using cinema camera and the color collection and grading technique is a powerful tool for night survey. So we got evidences. So who are the true lovers? So they are just night birds are just 3 species. So I should distinguish them from others. So and yeah, so yes, they can find and eat pre-harvest lotus root in mud. So from now on, I'm going to analyze the frequency of foraging behavior for each bird, each waterfall, and we are now trying to inventing the alternative bird net by scaring their true lovers out of pre-harvest field into post-harvest field without killing them. my idea is using laser beam, but we are just try this technique in this winter. So we should share the evidence, and I'd like to reduce conflict. Yeah, thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much, Miyuki. We have time for questions. I have a general question for you. The third part of the next steps is sharing the evidence with the people. How do you think that sharing the evidence, people are open to the evidence that you provide? Do they believe the evidence that you provide?
I believe and I hope so. And some birdwatchers, for some birders, it was difficult to accept the true result, but now their mind are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and for farmers, so they, they wanted to get these data. So yeah, so they said, so finally we can show the results to audience or citizens. So I hope we can communicate each other.
Thank you. It seems like you're starting to convince them that your data are important.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yeah, good.
Yeah.
It's a question. There's a question from Jeff. Says, I remember there was a presentation on using acoustic scaring on sea ducks where they heard different frequencies. Do you think you could do the same on the bad ducks?
Well, actually, I'm not sure, but yeah. So yeah, we have to learn the these sea ducks or these other field examples. So yeah, I will follow the sea ducks or other field examples. So yeah, so sorry, I cannot answer well.
Any other questions?
Sorry, there was another question. What if the laser doesn't work? Do you have other ideas? And then just to follow up regarding the laser, would that be like an automatically operated thing, or would people be out there?
No, my idea is detecting the sound callings of the three true lovers, three distinguish the who are coming to the pre-harvest lotus field by their call or the visual image, or so yeah, and detecting the coming and scaring. So not automatic, not always, but just they're coming. That's just when they come.
Do you have other ideas if the laser doesn't work?
Well, that's a problem. But we have to find a way to not using current BirdNet. So scaring by sounds or lasers or something. So if you have any suggestions, please.
All right, this wraps up our session. Thanks to all the presenters and thanks to all the authors for the work that you did. Just want to let you all know at 4 o'clock, we have the committee fair and then the business meeting. Please come. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Danielle, thanks for helping out on the session.
Yeah, no problem. I was planning to be here anyway.
Well, I'm so glad. Oh, Marisa, is Marisa here?
She was. I don't know if she might have gotten off. She was there for most of it though.
Good, good.
Yeah. So I'll see you at 4.
All right, see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.